it's looking a little bit cloudy. There'll be outbreaks of rain and drizzle from mid-morning with hill fog and some coastal mist as well. Highest temperature around 16 degrees Celsius in the moderate to fresh south to southwest wind. The rain and drizzle will clear away this evening, leaving the night mostly dry, but still fairly cloudy. Minimum temperature no lower than 11 degrees Celsius with a moderate to fresh west to southwest wind. Sunrise this morning was at 4:44 and sunset this evening will be 9:54. Now we've got the lovely Phil Gawne with us, who's going to give us the weather for you in Manx. Thank you very much, Phil.
An emshe dú, Bodgelach leis flia, froch, dramain, na Joonlach, bridgemark, nishes richt, leis cave, froch, en de sleidjen as pert de grucht, slisten na mara. Temprele smu, mush 6 Celsius, ons gechen meenach na ua vai in jas, na jas hier. Ní an flia as Joonlach slocheel en as de beg shaw as be a feget chirum nach son an goed smu och fos bodgelach. Temprele slu mush 9 Celsius leis gia vienach na ua vai in hier na shia jas. An riet mi merach na le bodgelach elje leis bitbeg de lia eg tre generach. Esch Joonlach rís san jaasta. Higan gia meenach de vei ua na leidje vain jas na jas hia leis temprele surge 6 na 7 Celsius. Chirum son an cúd smúge mert leis shallan gial as grianach as temprele smú 8 Celsius.
Well, good morning to you. You're listening to Moghrey Jedoonee with me, Sarah Hendy, and the fantastic Phil Gawne, who's joined us in the studio this morning as my co-presenter. As you'll know, this is the first time I've done Moghrey Jedoonee, so Phil, I'm counting on you. You're leading this show.
Well, so far, so good. As they would say.
So far, so good.
Tell us, Jinu the Mai. You're doing well. Tell us, Jinu the Mai. Jinu the Mai. Doing well.
Gosh, I'm going to learn loads this morning.
I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
so.
Well, pleasure. I'm going to start off, before we get really stuck in, I'm just going to go through the pharmacies with you all today because, as we know, on a Sunday, pharmacies are a tricky thing to remember which one's open. In Douglas, we've got Lloyd's Pharmacy in ShopRite on Victoria Road. That's open from 10 till 2. Then we've got Boots the Chemist on 14 to 22 Strand Street. That's open 10:30 till 4:30. In the south, you can go to the Clear Pharmacy on Helmshaw House, Bayview Road, Port St Mary. That's 12 till 1. And then in Peel, we've got the Clear Pharmacy on 6 to 8 Michael Street. That's 12 noon till 1 p.m. also. And in Ramsey, we've got Lloyd's Pharmacy at ShopRite, Bowring Road, Ramsey from 10 till 2 p.m. You can get all of that information on the Manx Radio website. So if you can't remember all I've said there, then head on over to the Manx Radio website and you'll find all the details. But for now, here we are. I'm Moghrey Jedoonee. Thank you so much for joining us, Phil. What's on the agenda today? What are we chatting?
Well, I thought that it would be quite interesting if you and I just talked a little bit about your experiences of learning Manx culture, a general chat, I suppose, about cultural identity, the context of Manx identity in a sort of more global setting. But also we've got, there was a piece appeared on social media. I think I first saw it being tweeted by Tynwald, in which the Oxford English Dictionary, there's a blog by a fellow called Kelvin Corlett, name like Corlett, he must be Manx, mustn't he?
Oh, aye.
And that's all about some Manx dialect words getting into the Oxford English Dictionary. Also, Culture Vannon, who sponsor the programme through the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee, have been tweeting this week about notes on the flitter dance, which Mona Douglas took or recorded. So we'll do a little bit about that. And we've got the final quarter of the song Marinus and Tiger. For those who've been listening over the last month or so, they'll understand that we've got to the position where the Manxies who'd bought themselves a privateer to go out chasing after the enemies, whoever they were, have ended up catching the wrong boat, and we find out what happens to them, and it's not particularly good.
Oh, I've been listening. It's a gripping story. I can't wait for that last instalment. Thank you. Lovely. Well, where do we begin? Where should we start?
Well, I mean, you were saying just before before we started broadcasting that you learned a bit of Manx at school. I don't know, how much Manx would you say you've got?
Very little these days. It's amazing how if you don't use it, you do start to forget. And I can still recognise like words on signs and the odd bit and piece. I can still say cabin the hay, which is always very handy if you're around at someone's house.
Absolutely.
And
of course, cabin the hay, for people who don't know, is a cup of tea.
Cup of tea. Yeah, get us a cabin the hay, will you? And Rona, I remember particularly. That's a seal, isn't it?
Yeah, roan is a seal.
Roan,
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And jellyfish was
smug Rona.
Rona.
Yeah,
that was the one
that's it.
That stuck in the head.
And again, for the uninitiated, smug is the word for snot. So smug Rona, effectively seal snot, is the word. Apologies if anyone's eaten their breakfast. Is the word for a jellyfish. In Manx, so smug Rona, if ever you see, and this is the sort of time where you might start seeing a few jellyfish. So.
Yeah, plenty in the more at Park Lake if you're thinking of dipping your toes in.
Right.
Look again, plenty
Gosh.
of smug Rona there.
Yeah.
So watch out for them. But yeah, they're the only words that really stuck with me. I mean, I recognise more, and there's plenty in Manx songs that I remember, and because they were some of the first songs I learned. Céir de Vanya was one of the first ones that I remember learning, and I can remember I was at Bride School, and there were only about 14 students at the time, and we were wanting to perform it for the Crignac competitions, and when my teacher found out, you know this, I should maybe stand up in front of the school and teach it to everyone. And my mum came along a few days later just to make sure I got all the words right. And I don't know, I think I was about 4 or 5 years old. And but it's one of those lovely songs that really, it's still a family song. It's still like a really comforting song.
No, it is a nice song that. Well, we could sing it later, I suppose, but maybe not. And of course, your mum, for those who don't know, is known across the island for being a very good, in fact, a great Manx singer. Performed with, what did she? She was.
She was with it still is with Man and Folk.
Man and Folk,
it's just her and John these days.
Yeah.
And Dillisowry as well. She sang with Dillisowry, but she was over the years. I think she tells me stories of the days when she was about 15, 16 and going and performing at the pubs and stuff, and coming home from university to perform with these different bands. And she's been doing it such a long time, and she's the Manx song encyclopedia. That's where I'd learn anything from, good. Really. But
and of course, apart from the really important stuff like Manx music, she's also got something to do with Tynwald now, hasn't she?
Something or other. I can never quite remember. And there's a couple of letters there that's on the end of her name. The letters arrive, and she's got these extra initials. She's already got enough initials.
Yes, quite right.
But with I don't know if you know my mother's full name. She's going to kill me for this, but she's Marlene Mary Medora Maria. How about that?
Gosh.
I know. And she's getting married at Christmas time, and then she'll be Marlene Mary Medora Maria Masker. It's not a very Manx name, is it?
Too many
MLC.
Far too many M's.
Yeah, way too many M's.
And with an MLC on the end.
With MLC as well. Yeah, plenty going on there.
Yeah.
But so I learned most of it from my mum.
And as far as language and music and culture and things, because you're obviously a generation younger than me, maybe 2 generations younger than me, I don't know. What would you say? How does this impact on the identity of people of your generation? Is Manx stuff important anymore, or is it becoming less important? I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
I'd say so, and I think we've seen a sort of a renaissance almost, where we are engaging more, and there's more happening on the Isle of Man now than I've ever known there to be. I'm 30 this year, and I went away for a few years, came back, and there's definitely there's more celebration of our national identity. There's Year of Our Island, Culture Vannin put on all sorts of events, and we together they kind of it reminds us what our native culture is and helps us celebrate it. And I think it's very important. I think that it's important that we know our own traditions and heritage, because that forms our identity, whether we realise it or not consciously. And also, it's quite exciting seeing how our culture on the Isle of Man is evolving as the island's population becomes more diverse. We've got so many new communities on the island who, some very well established now, but it all influences our everyday lives and what we feel Manx culture to be. So you've got kind of those 2 different spheres sort of working with each other, which is really lovely, and more and more to be seen of that. I think there's so many events coming up this year that will help us celebrate that further.
Yes, I think it is fantastic, and certainly having. I suppose one of the things that you find when you get to my age is you start to realise that things aren't set in stone. I mean, I think certainly when I was first got involved in sort of the cultural movement, I assumed that things would always be in a particular way, or things would happen in a particular direction. But it's not always like that, and the things that I was used to when I was growing up, like everybody went to chapel or church, for example, and now hardly anybody does. Apologies to those who do, but there was quite a strong tradition of hymn singing and all that, which I never dreamed would ever die out. But actually, the more you look around nowadays, you start thinking, actually, there's a serious risk here, and certainly the way in which families, you'd have these large families. My great uncles and aunts all had a particular part. I think there was 8 of them in the family, and each had there was two voices to each part, and this was just a normal thing in tradition, older Manx families. But trying to get people to sing nowadays is, unless there's a healthy pop beat going along behind it, it seems much more difficult.
I don't know, you need to pop round to our house on a Sunday morning, Phil.
Right.
Oh yeah, we've got Marlene at the piano, and Auntie Linda comes round at 12,
and
many a time we'll be sat there singing around something, and in the car, raised on 3-part harmonies.
Good.
You know what we're like, we're
absolutely
all singing away all the time.
I should say it's a bit like that in our house, but not on a Sunday morning, because I end up having to come in here. But,
goodness.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to start some 3-part harmonies, won't we? We're just coming up to 10:20, so we'll just head to a little break, but we'll be back in just a moment with some more local chit chat. Well, that was Barul there with the girls of Balladool. Phil, you're just saying that brings back some lovely memories for you from sessions in the White House in the Central in Peel.
Yes. First of all, I was saying this to somebody the other night, because I was out playing the fiddle for the first time in several months, and I was saying, I'm sure we used to play the tunes a little bit slower. Now, whether it's that we played the tunes a little bit slower, or whether my fingers are getting a bit out of practice, I don't know. But yes, we used to play this. Actually, it was way back in the Central in Peel, when the music sessions used to be in there on a Saturday night with Colin Jerry. Everyone would play the sort of the chorus bit and part of the verse, and then there'd be this silence, and people would look at various musicians around the room. A particular musician would then have to play the B part of the verse, and then everyone would join in with the A part, and then silence again as this person had to play. It was great fun, and often resulted in terror amongst those in the session who weren't quite feeling up to doing this. But it was great fun. It was really good do. And the other thing, of course, about Balladool, which is very well known to me, obviously the South Balladool, not the North Balladool. I used to live just down the road at Poolvash, and of course Balladool, there's the ship burial on the mound up at the top of Balladool. And there's Balladool Farm, which was a model farm, Balladool Mansion House, where the Stevensons ended up, but prior to that, Captain Quilliam originated or originally, I think he built the place. So, a fantastic area for Manx history, and Arbury commissioners have been thinking about doing something to sort of promote the area a bit. We put in an application to Culture Vannon fairly recently, and just last week heard that indeed we are going to be allowed or we're going to be given some support for a talking bench. And one of the things on the talking bench is going to be the tune "The Girls of Balladool," which I thought was quite appropriate, really. I mean, bits about the history and maybe some folklore from the area as well, but. So if you're out in the Balladool area in the next probably about 3 to 6 months' time, you'll find the bench, and you can go and sit there and press the button after you've you've had a long walk from Castletown or Portadown, wherever it may be, you can sit on the bench, listen to a few tunes, listen to some yarns, and take your rest. So it should be good.
Oh yeah, that sounds amazing. Have we got many talking benches on the Isle of Man? I don't feel like I've seen any so far.
Manx National Heritage, I think, have got them. There's certainly one in Rushen Abbey. I'm not sure if they got any others around the island, but it was from them really I got the idea, and this is how we did it with Arbory Commissioners. So yeah, it's I think it's a good idea, and I think sometimes people get switched off by signage, and actually something a little bit innovative and novel, like a bench that you just have to go and sit on and press a button, and the next thing there's all these tunes and bits of stories coming out. I think that would be quite exciting, really. And the great thing for anyone who's thinking about doing this is, I think the benches are a bit pricey to start with, obviously more expensive than a normal bench, but the electronics that make the sounds happen are relatively easy. There's a solar powered unit, so you don't actually have to go and recharge the thing. So touch wood anyway, it should be a relatively straightforward, maintenance-free thing, which will give great joy and interest to anyone who decides to use it.
Absolutely, I'll be heading up Balladule, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Should we have a look at the weather? If anyone's walking Balladule this afternoon, you'll be wanting to know what it's looking like out there today. So it's cloudy today, of course, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle from mid-morning. We've got some hill fog and some coastal mist. Highest temperature today will be around 16 degrees Celsius in the moderate to fresh south to southwest wind, so take a jacket, I'd say. The rain and drizzle will clear away this evening, leaving the night mostly dry, but still fairly cloudy. Minimum temperature no lower than 11 degrees Celsius, with a moderate to fresh west to southwest wind. Outlook for tomorrow, it'll be another cloudy day, I'm afraid, with patchy rain around lunchtime, then misty through the afternoon, so not looking too fantastic. The moderate to fresh south to southwest wind will become fresh to strong from the south or southwest, with highs of 16 or 17 degrees Celsius. Tuesday, mostly bright with bright or sunny spells, temperatures up to 18 degrees Celsius, and the mainly moderate south to southwest wind will freshen into the evening as outbreaks of rain move in overnight. Over to you, Phil.
Well, on the weather forecast, because we're blessed with three different words, at least three words for mist. I've used them all. So I've used froch, dramain, na Jedoonee. So froch seems to be the thickest of the mists. Dramain is a sort of a more of a moderate one, and Jedoonee actually means dusty as well, and it's kind of a more of a thin, dusty sort of mist. So we've got three options there. I threw them all in. So an emshidu, Bardjalach, leis flia, froch, dramain, na Jedoonee, brisha mark, nishes richt, leis kei vroch, en a slagen as pert the root slisten the mare. Temperele smu moshe jeg Celsius, ons gierchen menach na ua vain jas na jas hier. Ni yn flia as Jedoonee slochele en as de beg, sure, as be a fega chirum noch son goed smu, och fos bodgelach, temperelus slu mos nen jeg Celsius leis gier venach na ua vain hier na shia jas. Merach le bodgelach elia richt, leis bitbeg de lia ec tregenerach es Jedoonee richt san jaste. Ik negeerken menach de vei ua na leidje vain jas na jas hier leis temperelus surge shejeg na shachtjeg Celsius chirum son a good smooge mert le shallen gyal as grienach as temperelus smoo hochtjeg Celsius.
Lovely stuff. Well, yeah, a little bit misty out there today, but hopefully brightening as the week goes on. We can only hope, eh? Manx Radio. Well, you're listening to Moghrey Jedoonee with me, Sarah Hendy, and Phil Gawne, who joins us as our host this week. Phil, we've been chatting about culture here on the Isle of Man, and something that we realised is that there's these different events and festivals which are celebrating other cultures on the Isle of Man as well, rather than just our native traditional culture. There's the Our Island, Our World festival at Peel Centenary Centre this September, the first of many, we hope, and that's in association with Year of Our Island. It's it's a really great mix. Have you heard of Backer Beyond before? You'll know Sheila and a Gig. It's some pretty big names coming over to play.
No, I was quite impressed looking at the list of bands that are going to be over, and but also with the idea, because I think sometimes we can get what's the word, pigeonholed perhaps. Anyone interested in Manx culture obviously can't be interested in anything else other than Manx culture, and I think the mix between cultures around the world, one of the exciting things perhaps of all the modern technology that bewilders me, and I'm sure others, is that you can connect to the world. The fact that you've got devices which allow you to speak to people anywhere in the world instantaneously for free if they've got Wi-Fi. That's amazing. But yeah, the way that music can travel very quickly through the internet, people can travel much more easily around the world too. I think it's really interesting, and the fact that we've got lots of different communities on the island that feel that their culture is important to them. I think that's really fantastic. I know there's a very good group of, is it Bulgarians? I think they are. There's some fantastic singers and dancers. I know we've got some a Polish community very strong. There's the Filipinos on the island. Various people from Africa now as well. So it should be. I think it's great that we're recognising that we're not just a Manx culture with a bit of an English culture and maybe a little bit of Irish and Scots thrown in as well, that actually the Isle of Man is much more cosmopolitan than that these days. Yeah,
for sure. And like you say, to see people sharing their culture, their native cultures from where they've travelled to the Isle of Man from with us is something really great, because it is a diverse population, and I know you see it in the carnivals. I remember there was a big display by the Filipino community in Ramsey a few years ago that I saw, and it was just incredible because we've never had anything quite like that on the Isle of Man before, and it just enriches our lives in so many ways.
Yes, yeah, and it also I think it gives us I think sometimes we can get a little bit, how would we put it? It's the Manx way to be a little bit talking things down and a bit negative sometimes, even about our own culture. But I think when you can see the joy and the fun that people get out of their own cultures and the pride that they have in their cultures. Hopefully that'll rub off on some of the more cynical elements in Manx society, and we recognise that actually our culture should be about fun, and I think sometimes we get far too intense. And I've done it myself, and I always try and avoid it. You get too intense about language and culture. If someone is not pronouncing a word properly, well, this is terribly bad. Or if they're using the wrong word for a particular thing, and actually we should recognise that in English, people use the wrong words. They mispronounce words. This happens. Why should we be suddenly so anxious about it happening when it's the Manx language or any other language for that matter? Allow people to express themselves in whatever way they wish, and gently, if you need to, encourage them to try and get their language to be a little bit better if necessary. But yeah, it's great. I mean, the opportunities to. I mean, we were out actually on Friday night in Peel and watching. Who are they called? Clash Fur. That's right.
I was going to say they were playing at the weekend.
Absolutely fantastic. Loads of different global influences, but primarily the tracks or the songs were all in Manx. But it was just really good and exciting and great that we can do that, have that sort of mixing of cultures.
Absolutely. Well, we'll hear more about this in just a moment. We're going to head to a quick break, but yes, Phil and I will be back just after this break. Well, you're listening to Moghrey Jedoonee this Sunday morning. It's 10:45, just coming up to 10:46 in fact. We're talking culture here on Moghrey Jedoonee this morning. It's Sarah Hendy with you and Phil Gawne. We're chatting culture until 12 today. You can get in touch with us on Facebook or Twitter using the handle @ManxRadio. You can email the studio at studio@manxradio.com, or you can send us a text on 166 177 to have your say in the conversation. We're talking about how about the culture on the Isle of Man and how it evolves with new influences from people from around the world moving to the Isle of Man and sharing their own cultures with us. And we've got this fantastic festival in Peel coming up, but it's the first festival of its kind, I think. I don't think I've seen any kind of world music festivals on the Isle of Man before.
I think the only thing that I can remember anything like this was if you go back many years, probably several decades, to when Alan Pickard, and prior to that his father, organised these international music festivals. They tended to be based around Castletown, or at least I remember them being in Castletown, and there would be groups from all over the world coming in, and again, really quite inspiring stuff to sort of witness all this sort of folk culture from all around the world. So yeah, that's probably the nearest I think that we've had, and it's great. You know, I know there's been some level of, particularly on social media, cynicism towards the whole concept of Year of Our Island 2018, and it probably didn't get off to the best of starts. I think it may have needed a little bit more planning, but personally, I think it's great that the Isle of Man government thinks it's a good idea to get behind the Isle of Man and promote all the really good stuff that we've got on the island. You know, this is not government force-feeding its propaganda on us. What it is doing is government is helping communities to say, you know, to express themselves and put on really good events like the event you're talking about, go to the website, find out about the grants, because there are still opportunities to get grants and support for events. If you've got some good ideas, the Year of Our Island people will undoubtedly give you huge sums of money to make it all happen.
We can only hope it. But it's a fantastic initiative, because I think it's giving people the opportunity where, say, they've had an idea of something they've wanted to see happening on the Isle of Man before, but you know, you can go for your funding from, say, the Arts Council if it's appropriate, or Culture Vannin if it's appropriate. But this is a unique setup where, although those bodies do support you in forming these events or projects or societies or whatever, Year of Our Island are really focused on helping you through. Although you still have ownership of the project or the event, they've got a really good team there who are dedicated to supporting you in planning. I mean, I've never planned an event on a big scale before. I wouldn't know where to start, and you know, they've got plenty of ideas of what might be good. It's a really lovely thing that yes, you can get funding, yes, you can get support, and you can get a bit of guidance on how these things work. So you're not just kind of venturing into this on your own. You've got the Year of Our Island team who are there to offer you a bit more encouragement. And of course today,
maybe we should have mentioned it earlier, our new national treasure, Bill Dale, of course, with Beach Buddies, are organising is it 7 beaches? There's the beach clean today, hoping for 1,000 volunteers. So fantastic that these things. I mean, I think Beach Buddies would be doing these things anyway, but Year of Our Island just helps people get involved and get connected to some things that perhaps they wouldn't have done anyway. And it is important, you know. I think identity, your personal identity, your sort of cultural identity, is something that certainly for me anyway, it's very important. And I think most people really, because of the quite scary global nature of the world these days, the fact that you can be subjected to all kinds of different cultural influences. It's hard sometimes to understand who you are, and you can get a little bit, overwhelmed by all this stuff that's happening. So having your own sort of national identity, cultural identity, I think is quite important.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. We're going to head to another quick ad break. We'll be back on the other side of this. It's just about 10 to 11. Okay, so today's looking a little cloudy with some hill fog, coastal mist, and a few outbreaks of rain or drizzle. Highest temperature today will be 16 degrees Celsius in the moderate to fresh south to southwest wind. The rain and drizzle will clear away this evening, leaving the night mostly dry, but still fairly cloudy. Minimum temperature no lower than 11 degrees Celsius. Outlook for tomorrow will be another cloudy day with patchy rain around lunchtime, then misty through the afternoon, I'm afraid. The moderate to fresh wind, fresh west to southwest wind will become fresh to strong from the south or southwest with highs of 16 or 17 degrees Celsius. And as you're listening to Moghrey Jedoonee, we've got Mr. Phil Gawne with the news, with the weather in Manx, rather.
An emshid due, Bardulach leis flia, na Johnlach brisha mark nishes reach leis cavroch and a slagin as pert the grucht and a slisten the mara. Temperatuur smoo mos 6 Celsius ons gechen meenacht na ua vai en jas na jas hier. Ni een fliar is Johnlach slocheel en jas de beg sure as be a faggot chirum nachs on good smoo. A temperatuur slew mos 9 Celsius leis gia venach na ua vai hier na shia jas. En riet be merach na le Bardulach elia leis bitbeg le lia ag tregenarach es Johnlach rís san jasta hig na gechen meenach de vei ua na leidja vain jas na jas hier leis temperatuur surge 6 na 7 Celsius. Chirum son cwd juge mert leis shall and gyal as grianach as temperatuur smoo 8 Celsius.
Well, you're listening to Moghrey Jedoonee with me, Sarah Hendy, and Mr. Phil Gawne as well. Phil, you were telling us earlier about some of the lovely Manx words that you used for mist, and there's been quite a big movement in Manx words and Manx colloquialisms, I suppose, that have taken centre stage on a wider field this week.
Yes. As I said earlier, I picked this up from a tweet from Tinwold Services, I think they're called, which was quite interesting. A blog by Kelvin Corlett from the Oxford English Dictionary, and summarising or cutting down some of what Kelvin was saying. It's not unusual for visitors to the island to remark that the island seems to possess an identity all of its own, distinct from those of its larger neighbours. While such remarks often focus on the slower pace of life on the island, distinctive place names like Cregnesh, Nyabel and Taltawill, or unusual surnames, and this is his description, such as Karen, Carouche, Mulchrist and Quaggan, one of the clearest expressions of this identity is found in the variety of English spoken and sometimes written on the island, a small sample of which we've included in the latest Oxford English Dictionary. So he goes on to say the Gaelic connection here. English has been the dominant language on the island since the 19th century, but for much of its history, its inhabitants mostly spoke a form of Gaelic related to that of Scotland and North East Ireland. This, together with an extended period of Norse rule during the Middle Ages, produced a variety of English, sometimes influenced by Gaelic grammar and peppered with Gaelic and Scandinavian loanwords such as Tinwold, Joch and Cusig, along with almost unique variants such as Deemster and Sheeding of often archaic English words. So interesting, he was talking there about the Scandinavian influence on Manx. We've been watching or catching up on some old episodes of this programme called The Bridge. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I don't know if it's a Danish or Swedish programme, but it's a mix between the two countries. Anyway, the programme is set there. And we keep identifying occasional Manx words like brow. They often talk saying brow, which is the Manx word, of course, for fine, and brow. So it's good to be able to note that there are some of these Scandinavian words there. Maybe I should be listening more for the plot than listening to the language that's being used. But yeah, it's interesting.
No, it's fascinating stuff, and it's always so interesting to. I had a friend who visited from Norway a couple of years ago, and he was absolutely fascinated by the presence of Old Norse here, because although the Norwegian he speaks is a step removed from the Norse, which influences our own language and place names and things, he could still recognise them. And Laxey was it would be Laxer, and he was saying Loxel and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that. Was one that I remember, and Timold, of course, meant something to him, and it's really amazing how long these things have been with us and how we still use them.
Absolutely, and again, actually, with the Gaelic as well, the Gaelic influence on the island. There's a number of words that we use in Manx which have gone out of fashion completely in Irish and Scottish Gaelic. So I'm trying to remember which ones they are now, and I'm bound to get them wrong. But I have a feeling billion might be a word that's uncommon in the other Gaelic languages now. But there's yes.
What does billion?
Oh, sorry, yes, billion
Billion?
is a tree, and I think they tend to use crone for a tree. Well, we use crone for a mast in Manx, or a post, I suppose, a big tall post. So crone halgi would be a lamp post. Halgi or solja is the word for light, and then because of the sort of the grammatical construction, solja becomes halgi. So crone halgi would be a lamp post. And is it east? I think might be the other one. The one that is quite unusual. That we've got it. But the only examples of it in Irish, you have to go back 1,000 years to find it in some of the ancient texts. So it's great, great that these things are still alive to a fashion on the island. And as you say about the old Norwegian, the language sticks around in interesting ways, which give clues to people's identity and possibly give fascinating clues to the way in which people have developed over centuries as well.
Yeah, because they do say that your language it forms a huge part of your identity and the way that you think about things, and having two languages can really alter the way that your brain functions and processes the outside world. Am I right in thinking that you and your son grew up speaking Manx first?
Yes. I still remember this unfortunate angry child coming back from primary school, where I think he'd been quite shocked to realise that the rest of the world didn't speak Manx. I mean, he sort of knew that there were certain people in his life that didn't speak Manx, but I do remember that first week thinking perhaps we should have spoken a bit more English to him when we were sort of bringing him up. But yeah, he still speaks a fair amount of Manx. But I think when he was starting primary school and not knowing some fairly basic words, like I forget whether it was words like red and blue. He knew the Manx words, but but wasn't so hot on the English ones. So I think that came as a bit of a shock to him when he started at primary school.
Oh, we should get him on the programme one day, shouldn't we?
Yes,
and find out how he feels about his upbringing with
yes,
Manx
it's probably
as his first
best if I don't listen to that that programme. But.
Oh, I don't know. They say that giving a child more than one language, especially at that age where they still can become fluent really easily, can set them up so well for the rest of their lives, because like I say, yeah, it does alter the way that your brain functions. I'm no scientist, I don't know how that works, but I'm sure with every language comes a mindset and its culture as well. So
yeah.
You've got those different the subtleties or the focus of the language and how you express yourself must have quite an impact on how you communicate and express yourself to the outside world.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the this is merciless self-promotion here, I suppose, because I'm chairman of the Bun School, the Manx Language School at St John's. But one of the things that we seem to excel at is the producing children who do extremely well at English and creative writing. And the thinking is that by expanding your mind to have two different languages that you can actually think in and express yourself in, when you come to writing in one language like English, you've got the sort of mindset that comes from having two different languages, which allows you to think more creatively and therefore write more creatively in English. And certainly the Bun School seems to do extraordinarily well there. Again, the children are all taught through Manx for most of their time at the Bun School, a little bit of English towards the end of their time. but they do exceedingly well in English when they leave the Bumskull. So
yeah. I suppose it makes you very adaptable in a sense, because even when it comes down to like formalities or the structure of a sentence or conjugating a verb, you have to remember which setting to enter, and so it must make you much more versatile.
And actually, so the thing that surprised me about this was actually that it also affected science results in a similar way, because again, science is about critical thinking, I suppose, as much as anything else, and being able to understand a problem and look at different angles to understand why a certain thing happens in a certain way, and then be able to do measurements and write it all up, and that's what science is about. And of course, with being bilingual, you have two ways of looking at a problem and trying to sort the problem out. So it seems to work very well. But again, you mentioned about bilingualism allowing people, if you get to become bilingual at a fairly early age, there's a lot of research that seems to demonstrate that you can then become fluent not just in the target language but in lots of other languages. And they think there seem to be two lines of thought. One is, at an early age, your speech habits haven't become set, so you can learn different sound systems and everything without any real concern. The other thing I think is about self-consciousness, and again, up to the age of about 7 or 8, most children are not that self-conscious and don't worry too much about making mistakes. Once you get past 8 or 9 years old, then you start to become far more self-conscious. So if you're learning a new language, if you can do it before that self-conscious stuff comes in, the embarrassment of not being able to say the words properly or get the right sentence construction won't inhibit you, because you don't care when you're a little child.
Yeah, and it's amazing how it becomes increasingly harder to learn new languages. But I suppose the tragic thing about the English language is that now that it's the international language and the one of the languages that most people around the world do seem to aspire to learn, we don't have to bother ourselves as much as we should.
Yeah. I mean, there is a bit of that. I was interested last week. I thought Staffan Overgaard was on last week with Simon. And one of the things I heard Staffan saying was, of course, English is a very hard language to learn. It's one of the most difficult. And he's right. If you actually look at spelling systems, there's a huge number of different spelling systems in English, which means you get the word sort, S-O-U-G-H-T or S-O-R-T, pronounced exactly the same. So, trying to learn that language, and then there's all kinds of different ways in which you can put words together in terms of the grammar in English. It's an incredibly complex language, but because it's everywhere, of course, it's a lot easier to learn, because people pick language up primarily from what they hear in terms of communication, rather than trying to read words from books. So yeah. All those English speakers out there, there's hope for you yet. You've learned one of the most complicated languages in the world.
Yeah, next on the agenda, Mandarin. I believe that's going to be the next international language, and another one that's rather tricky to learn. But we'll have more of this just after the break. We're going Well, good morning to you. It's 23 minutes past 11 here this Sunday morning on Manx Radio. You're listening to Moghrey Jedoonee with me, Sarah Hendy, and Phil Gawne. Phil, just before we went to that break, you were telling us about how some Manx words have made their way into the Oxford English Dictionary. Yes,
there's this blog by Kelvin Corlett, which if anyone's interested, if you go to, I think it's public.oed.com, but if you just look up Oxford English Dictionary, there's a blog there, and it's titled "Come and Have a Skeet at the Manx Dialect," you say. And we heard a little bit there from Kelvin's blog earlier, and he goes on to say, thanks largely to a handful of Manx poets, playwrights and authors writing in the 19th to early to mid-20th century, there are plenty of literary examples of Manx English demonstrating the various features of the dialect. The following excerpt is from the poem Tre the Lure by Josephine Kerman, who wrote in the early 20th century under the pen name Cosig. And this will be known to a number of listeners, I'm sure. The house is all through others, the childer's late for school, the man is spending all his time in looking for a tool, the woman is tired tremendous with cleaning up the floor, and the one that's doing all the jail is wicked tra the lure. So he goes on to say, apart from the use of the word jail, which is damage or mischief, and the phrase tra the lure, time enough, often used with reference to a perceived tendency of the Manx towards procrastination, and it's not perceived, certainly in my case, procrastination is a terrible infliction. One of the most conspicuous details setting the language of Kerman's poem apart from standard English is the adverbial use of tremendous or tremendous as a post-modifier of tired. A similar formulation appears in the short story The Fairy's Victim by Bill Billy, published in 1899. I'm often putting a sight on owl Phil Juden Ferrick, for he's good mortal for a couche, or a chat, of course. So very interesting little blog this, and I'd certainly say it's well worth a skeet on the Oxford English Dictionary's website.
Absolutely, and skeet's one of the words that's gone in, isn't it?
Yes,
that's something that we still use today in English. It's one of the colloquialisms, I suppose. What do you think? I don't know. How did they find out about these words? Do you reckon? It always baffles me that they know.
Yeah, well, I'm fairly sure that with a name like Corlett, the man writing the blog must have had some sort of connection with the Isle of Man at some point. But Chris Thomas, Minister Thomas, I should call him now, was terribly proud of the fact that I think they've quoted him. There was something that he'd said in Tynwald. I think he'd used tre the lure. So he was very chuffed with the fact that his quote from Tynwald Hansard had been used in the Oxford English Dictionary.
And we were talking about pronunciation before as well. These words that we might use, which are colloquialisms, how do we... Can you give us any guidance for any of us? Like, I know I learned some Manx, but I can still look at a word and our friend, your son Ewan Gawne, often he's our go-to man for anything written in Manx that we're not sure how to pronounce.
No pressure there, Ewan.
And told me things like Noah Bakehouse, as we know it, would actually be pronounced Nor, which is something I didn't know. Like, can you give us any little handy hints for if we are trying to kind of use more Manx words in our sort of day-to-day language, how we can approach them? And I don't know how the letters are used, because for instance Wales in Welsh a W is an sound and things that. Like, what kind of sounds do we find in the Manx alphabet that might help us sort of
Manx is fairly standard. I know a lot of people find it hard to believe, but the spelling system is fairly standard. There's a few vowel combinations which can cause problems, but of course the one thing I would say is, if you're going to use Manx words, do them with confidence and gusto, and most people will probably not even realise if you got them wrong. But the hardest element in Manx to get your head round is the EY on the end of words. So Dunya, D-O-O-I-N-E-Y. Most people would say Dunny. I mean, I'm clerk to Russian parish commissioners, and I'm having to bite my tongue every time a new resident of the Ballakillia estate rings up and says, "Oh, I'm living at Ballakilly." And I'm thinking, you're not actually living at Ballakilly, you're living at Ballakillia. And again, it's the EY sound, that kind of sound at the end of a word, which does throw people. That's probably the hardest one. But then you can get various combinations of vowels. And of course, Y in Manx is a vowel, not a consonant, for various reasons. So the hardest one is, for example, a word like gear, which is the word for wind, and that's spelt G-E-A-Y. So this E-A-Y sound is kind of an sound, but different parts of the island had different ways of pronouncing that E-A-Y. So that it ranges from or ear, like ear, different variants of this e sort of sound. And this is why I say, whatever you do, just read the word with a bit of confidence and bravado, and I'm sure no one will notice.
Excellent advice. Thank you very much. One that I tripped over recently was I was introducing Ruth Kegan singing, is it Egan in Bethlehem?
Yeah, Egan.
Egan, yeah. It doesn't look like Egan on a page, does it? And I tripped over that fantastically. But then when I thought about it, it was so clear because Evi is spelled in exactly the same way. The O-I is more of an E sound than an Oi. So poor Ruth got introduced to singing Oikenan's Bethlehem, which I don't think is a local tune.
Well, that's good. Well, of course, the other thing about this is unusually with that particular word, there is a little bit of confusion in that what Manx people tended to do with a K and a hard sort of C-K sound in the middle of a word would sometimes be softened into a G. So for the word Igan, which is an infant, you'd tend to say Igan, more of a G sound than a K. The word Eakin means officers. So Eakin ons Bethlehem would be officers in Bethlehem, as opposed to Igan ons Bethlehem, which is the infant in Bethlehem. So again, relatively rare in Manx to have that bit of confusion on a word, but yeah, in that particular case, it could be difficult.
It could. That old Manx Carvel officers in Bethlehem are our favourite here. So we're going to have another quick look at the weather again, just to keep everyone up to date with what's going on out there. So today is a bit cloudy with hill fog, some coastal mist, and a few outbreaks of rain or drizzle, unfortunately. Highest temperatures today will be 16 degrees Celsius in the moderate to fresh south to southwest wind. The rain and drizzle will clear away this evening, which is something to look forward to. It'll leave the night mostly dry, but still fairly cloudy, unfortunately. Minimum temperature tonight no lower than 11 degrees Celsius. And tomorrow we'll be looking at another cloudy day with patchy rain around lunchtime, then misty through the afternoon. The moderate to fresh south to southwest wind will become fresh to strong from the south or southwest with highs of 16 or 17 degrees Celsius.
Well, an Emshire bodulach na flioch son and cood smoo. But just going through some of the words that we're using here, Manx is blessed with lots of words for wet and grey and miserable weather. So flia basically means rain. So kiau flia would be throwing rain. So te kiau flia, it's raining, you'd say. So te kiau flia, it is throwing rain, means it's raining. And flia is the word for rain. Froch, dramain, there's Jedoonee, they're all words for mist. Then you've got cave roch would be kind of a like bad fog or thick fog. You've got what else have we got here? Drucht is the word for kind of a thin mist, a sort of mist that you get from on a hot day where water would evaporate and create that kind of mist. So that's drucht. So you've got the flia, froch, dramain, Jedoonee, and as I said earlier, Jedoonee means that kind of fine, almost like a dusty mist. It also means dusty in Manx. And then drucht is that kind of evaporating sort of mist that you get on a hot day from the sea. And what was the other one? K, which is the kind of fog or mist, and cave roch would be a kind of a thick, bad fog. So and unfortunately we're going to have to get used to that for the next few days.
I know, it's not fair, is it? I was just getting used to that lovely sunny weather as well. I thought summer had arrived, and I suppose it had, and maybe now it's been and gone. But I do love the greyness of the Isle of Man. There is sort of a certain mystical quality to it, especially with the Manannan's cloak.
Absolutely, and it's doing a fantastic job for my strawberries, which had been desperately in need. I mean, I've been watering them a bit, but you don't get the same as a proper downburst from the clouds. So,
nothing like a good Manx strawberry after a good drizzly Manx summer.
Absolutely.
We're gonna have a little bit of music now. We've got "Don't Hurt Me Now" from the Moghrey Band, another great tune from the Isle of Man. So sit back and enjoy this one. Well, you're here on Sunday morning with Phil Gawne and Sarah Hendy from Moghrey Jedoonee. Don't forget you can get in touch with us via Facebook or on Twitter using the handle @ManxRadio. Email us in the studio at studio@manxradio.com or send us a text on 166 177. We're just going to head to a quick break now, but on the other side of this we'll be discussing more Manx cultural events and topics. Well, good morning.
Moghrey Jedoonee, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
Whoops, said Daisy. Good morning. It is Sunday morning. It's 20 to 12, and you're here with Phil Gawne and Sarah Hendy on Moghrey Jedoonee. Phil, just before we went to that break, you were telling me that we've got some interesting news about some of Mona Douglas's work, some notes on the flitter dance.
Yes, this is it was a tweet I noted from Culture Vannon, our sponsor through the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee. And basically they've got online now the PDF copy of the Choloc books notes of Mona Douglas in relation to the flitter dance. Now, Choloc books is produced by Stephen Miller, and there's some fantastic stuff in there. If ever you have the opportunity to buy some Choloc books, I would strongly urge you to do so. But they do come with a health warning. If you have any difficulty with your reading, you do need to have your glasses, as I'm discovering now, so apologies if I if I don't quite read these out the way that the words appear on the page. I thought it would be interesting to read a few notes about the flitter dance. Flitter dance is one of the more popular dances. It's a processional dance, and the thing that seems to have marked it out is that it's described here as a kind of chain dance winding in an S shape back and forwards over the dying fires until it was stamped out, and it has that sort of stamping movement to it. So anyway, the notes that Mona Douglas collected, this was certainly early part of the 20th century. Mrs. Callow Cardleveg says that when she was a girl, there was a special dance that used to be danced on the shore when the people went there on Good Friday to gather flitters. Flitters, of course, is the word for a limpet. The whole business used to be quite a ceremony. A fire was made of maturichan. Apparently your mum used to sing with maturichan. Apparently it's driftwood or things washed up by the sea. So the fire was made out of that and weeds, and cakes were baked on it, which was to be made without the aid of iron or steel. So everything done on a Good Friday. I mean, we had this when I was working at Craignash. You weren't allowed to use iron or steel, which was quite difficult when you were trying to muck out the cows, because most of the implements you had were made out of iron or steel. But you're not supposed to use iron or steel on a Good Friday traditionally in Manx sort of culture. So no griddle could be used. So these cakes we were talking about were baked in the ashes, like the Sodag Valu, or the Dum cake, which is something more to do with earlier on in February, but we'll go into that another time. Flitters were also baked in their shells, and everyone ate of them with cakes and drank milk. The food, milk, and a sod from the fire were thrown into the sea with a spoken charm. And after this, everyone danced. And then Mona goes on to say, could get no details about the dance, but that they were in couples and in a long line that wound round and about in a sort of S shape. So you can find out a lot more about that, the flitter dance and Mona's notes via the Culture Vannon website. But I just thought it was really interesting listening to the fact, the way in which, or the notes that Mona had taken back then, getting on for 100 years ago. And I think sometimes we think that our culture possibly has been a bit made up in as much as it was revived, and there's some truth in that, but equally Mona, who has been challenged a bit from time to time as someone who was very good at making things up, or as Mona would put it, hearing tunes from the fairies, which that's good enough for me. Mona did actually have real people that she spoke to who had real recollections of this as well. And again, with the songs, there's written evidence of other people collecting these things too. So,
gosh, it's quite incredible, and it's lovely to hear the story behind that dance and what it really means. Because I'm sure you'll have danced it with Perry Ben. I danced it with Nafani growing up, and it's a great tune. It really is, like you say, it's got that stamping quality.
Absolutely.
As a child, I loved it. It was one of the first Manx instrumental tunes without any words that I really caught on to and used to dance around the kitchen before I knew anything about Manx dancing, quite embarrassingly. But yeah, it's lovely to hear where that would have been danced and how that came about and what that meant for us culturally.
Yeah, and it's a very, very simple dance, which is nice, because I think sometimes, possibly, in an endeavour to make more of our culture, the people who did collect dances tried to dress them up into perhaps more elaborate dances than maybe they had originally been, which then makes them a little bit distant from the people who you're trying to get to dance them, whereas the flitter dance is dead easy. Anyone can do it, even I can do it. So with my flat feet, it's ideal actually, and it's a great tune to play as well. Really nice tune. We should have had it ready, shouldn't we?
Oh,
maybe another time.
Yeah, next time.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, nice tune to play. What instruments do you play? I've not heard you play.
Just the fiddle.
Okay.
I mean, I can play the whistle a bit, but fiddle. And I've had various excuses, primarily because I was distracted by politics for a few years, but I really must get back into playing the fiddle again, not least because I'm supposed to be going away to represent the Isle of Man at a minority language festival in Friesland in a month's time, and I've just found out I'm supposed to be doing an hour. Well, an hour of singing is going to be a pretty tiresome process for the audience, not least myself as well. So I'm going to have to get going on that fiddle again.
Yeah, learn to beatbox or something.
Well,
or, adapt some of these tunes into a bit of a rap piece.
Somebody suggested that maybe I should bring some technology with me that I could have playing in the background, and I thought, yeah, that's a good idea, because it always takes an extra 10 or 15 minutes to set up the technology, and then it doesn't work anyway. So that would fill up a fair bit of the hour that I'm supposed to be performing. But
sounds like a plan. You're on the case. Well, we're gonna take a little bit of a break right now, but we'll be back in just a few moments.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Well, good morning to you. This is Jedoonee with me, Sarah Hendy, and Phil Gawne. We're here just for another few minutes now before the news at 12 o'clock. Phil, you've got the final instalment this week for us I'll let you introduce it, but many of us have been listening for the last few weeks and are keen to hear the last bit. But for anyone who hasn't been following, what are we about to be treated to?
Well, it's Marinus and Tiger, the voyage of the Tiger. But just before I do, I just had a message in from Adrian Kane, who's set me up, for want of a better word, for this Friesland visit, and he says, "Gawne molestal one ya, harau fis the rawi sonua." So sorry, yes, I hadn't realised it was a full hour. This is talking about the hour I'm going to have to fill when I get to Friesland.
Oh, he's dropped you right in it, hasn't
Nabba veg, I would say to Aid in response. Don't mention it. Don't worry about it. So yeah, back to the Marinus and Tiger. Basically, what's happened here? It sounds great. I only wish I was around couple of 100 years ago, where you could just gather a group of people together and decide, do you know what, we'll buy ourselves a little warship and we'll go off to sea and fight and capture an enemy vessel and bring it back with and benefit from the plunder. Anyway, obviously you can't do that nowadays, but the Manxies, as ever, didn't quite manage to get this right, and the last verse that I read out last time was Lia Higshin Dusnan Drimja Lugdun ve Roshten Tai and Long Vashin a Herten the Rowie Gait Nyan Lai. So we soon knew, to our sorrow, after we arrived home, that the ship that we had captured was taken against the law. They'd captured the wrong side. Duatad the Row and Cushine Triat Fanish and Chianurt as a vel brew ons mannen ne brunus dew a hort. They said that our case would be tried before the governor, and there's no judge in man that will a verdict give for you. So nish gaushin reu de sarsten as meet myd siw ons sien, a siwl myd rhyw talw, na siol myd rhyw cyn. Now, go your way to England, and we will meet you there, and we will walk you on land, or will sail you on the sea. Och tamish nish ons mannen, as vousen tammy se, ha vodad me a littil, vai shajacht Moghrey here. But I am now in Manon, and from them I am free. Me they cannot hinder from my dear love's company. Sean eri Gawne chen tiger, van or je huish the kjol, vi kreket je son torre, den long the shin and nyoil. What befell the old tiger? The cause of so much noise. She was sold to pay the loss. This is the loss from the ship that they'd captured illegally. The captured ship had suffered. So, Gavashin Shajach Kennel as train ons corpus cree, Drach hall as Drachly jaily, the nether kusha be. So this is an interesting little verse. Though we were a jovial crew, strong in body and pluck, bad advice and bad leaders will ruin any cause. Tan fall to gaiet der vananach, or trias fenagare, te crina lug len vergi, och speg von deis te dare. The fault that haunts the manxman, a cause of grief to most, he one day after the fair's wise, when it is of no use. So basically, the day after the fair, it's too late to be wise after you've known, you find out what's really happened. O shush mareniach chira, te geestiach rishmer en, machol te juve crina, houds tantre a man. Oh, my countrymen who are listening to this lovely song, my advice to you is be wise as long as there is time. Shein chush to all you high lie the goil kirel ons tre, rosh be len vergi harish, nan drimje son the brech. And finally, it is what all depends on, the taking care in time, before the fair day's over, for regrets last forever. So, yeah, didn't turn out as well as the boys had hoped when they started off with Limerach as Kjol, you dancing or leaping and music back in the start when they were all keen and they were going to go out and everything was going to be wonderful. And sadly, they captured the wrong boat. Some of them, I think, ended up getting fined, and I think prison was mentioned and all the rest of it. But in the end, things worked out. But the advice is to all Manx people, just be a little bit cautious and you think perhaps plan things ahead. For example, a little guide on the flags of the nations, particularly the nations that you were trying to capture, might have been a helpful thing if they'd have had that.
Absolutely, I think you're right there. We're just heading up to the news now, but what a lovely note to finish on. Thank you so much, Phil. I feel like I've really learned something today on my first Moghrey Jedoonee. It's been a pleasure presenting with you, and looking forward to doing so again at some point in the future. Back next Sunday, 10 o'clock. Is that right?
Shenkiat, as good as my moyo. Thank you very much.
Oh, lovely, thank you. So on the other side of the news at 12, we've got Roger Watterson, who will be taking a closer look at the potential implications of the establishment of a public defender unit with President of the Isle of Man Law Society, Jane Grey. You've been listening to Moghrey Jedoonee with me, Sarah Hendy, and Phil Gawne. As Phil said, we'll be back next Sunday at 10 for more Moghrey Jedoonee, though of course it won't be me. I'll be back on Wednesday at 5:30 for Spotlight on Manx Radio, and next Saturday morning as well for the Saturday Morning Breakfast Club. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a lovely weekend and enjoy Sunday Opinion and The Man in Line, which is coming up just now.